I understand that Mark's got a few remarks he wants to pass on and share with us. So we'll do that now as we're collecting the raffle tickets. Last chance, if you want to get raffle tickets from the pocket.
Oh, yeah.
I hate when that happens.
Was that my phone?
I wasn't.
Thank you, son.
I do have a few things I would like to say because I couldn't even remember exactly myself how all this coalesced to begin the Fife and Drum Corps. And there are a lot of disparate strains that came together. Usually I have some note cards, but this is kind of thrown together at the last minute. Why Plymouth and why me in Plymouth and how did all that happen? Well, I'm from Wayne, which is close enough to get to Plymouth, you know, in about 20 minutes. Born in Ann Arbor, but lived in Wayne most of my life and did music at my parents' originally their insistence, but pretty soon, you know, that was part of what I was interested in doing. And all through my high school band experience, all those things in some way or other seeped into my interests and my ideas. But a key thing that probably no one knows is that the Plymouth Community Band is what got me to Plymouth. And I played with the community band from when I graduated in high school in '63 until about '72, overlapping the start of the Fife and Drum Corps. But even still, all that did was get me to Plymouth. But it was Jim Griffith, the many-year band director in Plymouth, who said, well, Mark, why don't you come and teach my drummers in the band? That was just as I had gotten out of school. So all that other time I was in Plymouth summer while I was going to school. And I said, well, I'd love to do that. That sounds really great. Now, in the interim, I had gotten all involved in drum and bugle corps and rudimental drumming, which I did not know in high school, but through a lot of circumstantial situations, I got hooked up into that in the mid-'60s. That's through my brother, who was at Michigan State, and I was at Michigan. There was never really that much of a rivalry. We had a picture of, you know, the green uniform and the blue uniform next to each other. But he and people at Michigan State were involved in drum corps. And they got me involved in this kind of ragtag group in 1966 that just happened to have somebody who taught their drumming in Jay Toomey, and I know that name has been on the website, that's someone that I had known, who actually had a Connecticut background. And I was trying to figure out on the way over here, through maybe 8 or 9 sessions in somebody's basement in 1966 for the summer months, I kind of learned the basics of this in the true Connecticut fashion, I think, and kept that in my psyche, so to speak, but only partially used that with marching band because I was faster and didn't play ancient tunes. Somewhere along the line, because I did marching band in the fall for Plymouth in '69, '70, and '71, and then I said, man, we're going to have to put all this stuff away till next summer. So it was in November '71, and I think the Corps has that sheet of paper. I've faxed it over, handwritten, and it says, there's some drummers here in marching band who would like to do something a little more, and if any of you folks, and it was primarily gals, it didn't have to be, it turned out that way, who play flute or clarinet or bassoon or whatever, want to come and try out these fifes with us. So we did that. That was in November, and it kind of started slowly. We did a couple of jobs in the spring, but somewhere in May, I saw this ad that says there's going to be a 4th of July celebration in Lake City. So I called this guy up, and they had paid to have 3 corps come from Connecticut. I said, well, we have a Fife and Drum Corps here in Michigan. Nobody had ever heard of us. He says, you do? Well, can you come up and do a show for us? I said, yeah, sure, that's what we'd like to do. So this all came together very quickly. The thing that the oldie alumni people are going to do, on the bottom it says May 1972, so I threw that one piece together in May '72, and then we played at the 4th of July in that same year. So that was, and we had a couple of parades, that was about it. That was metal fifes and high school drums and everybody bought their own white Dockers, and we did make the striped shirts. So the cost was like, you know, a couple bucks per person. It was really on a shoestring. I could just go over a couple of the other things that, and I can't quite keep everything in mind, but I think that same year Carol and I went to Deep River because we knew that we needed to find out more about ancient cores. So we went out there in '72 so that we could take the core in '73. That year we went to Tippecanoe and Old Fort Henry on the way. So the picture that was on the cake last night was the first trip to Old Fort Henry. I'm pretty sure up on the ramparts. It's a really memorable picture. I think we did many band shows with drills through the summer. There were a lot of summer band shows that aren't anymore. In '74, we went to the Connecticut Fighters and Drummers Association, not to be confused with the company, two separate groups, and we competed in a class of one, but they actually took us and the whole thing. Somewhere I had the sheets from that. That was a great experience. And we stayed with the Connecticut Yanks. If you're old enough or into history, you know that the Connecticut Yanks were a very good corps until the late '70s, and then they just totally cut it off. But they had very good players, and they were influential in things that I was picking up to write for the corps. A couple other really quick things. You know, we went to the Old Guard muster, I think in '74 and '75, I'm pretty sure in '75. That was really neat because there were a lot of corps there, so we got exposed to them. First time we saw the Old Guard was in '73, I think, at Tippecanoe, so they were always an influence. Other influences, and this may not be of interest to everybody, but recordings I got of the New York Regimental's Fife and Drum Band, which is probably defunct in the '60s someday, maybe we were from the '50s to the '60s. Very avant-garde, I think Long Island based. Terrific medleys. Several of our medleys were influenced by the kinds of things that they did. Civil War medley, Revolutionary War medley. Other influences were the Connecticut Yanks and, of course, the Old Guard. We just, you know, hung on everything that the Old Guard did. And in fact, I think that one year the warrant officer, and this will really get a kick out of this, the warrant officer, whose name escapes me, said, "We think you're kind of using a little too much of our stuff." And I said, "This is a little tiny corps from out here in the sticks, and you guys, come on, this is just a tribute to you, don't worry about it." So we never got anything after that. Yeah. '76 was the busiest year that Carol and I were involved with because everybody wanted to book a Fife and Drum Corps. So I think it started early with the Cherry Blossom Festival. It was the biggest year we had ever had, about 40 appearances. I'd say you probably even do more than that now, but there was a fair amount of travel. Cherry Blossom Festival, and then the Cherry Festival, two separate things, that one in Traverse City. Somewhere in the middle of all this, we didn't have anything to do on the second Saturday in July, so Carol and I flew out to Deep River just because we could want to be at Deep River in the bicentennial, but I'm sure we had Fife and Drum Corps jobs on Friday or Sunday or both. We played at the Silver Dome for the BCI North, and again, many parades that I can't all keep track of, and then the DCI Championships at Philadelphia, both the prelims and the finals we were on before and after, in front of all these people, so there were, I'm sure there were 30,000 there for that. That was a huge exposure for us. That would only come along once. I mean, they would only do that when we said, "This is the bicentennial, just Fife and Drum Corps." And I said, "Yeah, you know, historic, old," and that was a big deal. So that's kind of the summary of our experiences. I wish I could come up with all the names of people to thank. Especially thank Dave Tripp for putting together the alumni part of this and communicating with people. Sister to be here, and someone from a distance and everything. I think a hidden person that deserves thanks, I know he's not here, but if Jim Griffith wouldn't have had some vision of, well, let's do something with the drums, and then when I said, well, we're going to do this Fife and Drum Corps, it was almost a joint effort in the beginning because they provided the drums and the school provided the rehearsal. So, you know, if that hadn't have happened, there wouldn't be any fife and drum corps, just like so many other things. If I hadn't been exposed to somebody who taught me about Connecticut history, wouldn't have happened. And of course, all the people ever since that bought into the concept are the ones who really deserve the thanks. My parting thought is that you never know when you're touching someone how you're affecting their life. And I've even heard stories today of people say, you don't realize how you were a mom and dad to me, second mom and dad to me, parental figures. And I said, well, no, I mean, we treated you like you were part of the big family, but didn't know there was that much of a mutual feeling. So all of the people, and Rob and Joy and Cheryl and Linda and Jim, all these people that are going to be playing out here, some have been playing all along and some haven't played at all in 40 years. We thank all of them for being part of all that. And I've said way more than I intended to.
I get the last word because I always get the last word. I try to get the last word. We've been really fortunate because both sets of our parents instilled in us from the time we were that we were always to be as good as was possible. They didn't set impossible standards for us, they set high standards. And both Mark and I always knew that the worst thing we could do in the world would be to disappoint our parents, to do something that they would disapprove of, or that our grades wouldn't be good enough, or we didn't practice enough, or something like that. And so we've always had this idea in our heads that excellence and a level above that is something that we are always aiming for. And I think everything that we've done has been looking up here to that goal that may not be reachable, and trying with our students. I still teachers to bring these students, these young people, into this feeling of there's always something better that I can do. I can always practice a little more. I can always learn a little more. I can always reach out and help somebody a little more. And when I'm overwhelmed by all the people here, because when this all happened, first of all, I had to twist my arm. I was a flute player in high school and college. That wasn't my major instrument, but he said, "You want to be a fife instructor, don't you?" And I said, "No." Yeah. And he said the next day, "You really want to be a fife instructor, don't you?" I said, "No." I was teaching school full time. I don't know. Guess what? I got to be the fife instructor, and I ended up being a mom to all these kids because we didn't have any children until 1980. And our son is here, someplace, with his two wonderful dogs, who was in the Marine Drum and Bugle Corps for 4.5 years, by the way, and loves music as I won't wonder too much. But we've tried to instill in every person we come in contact this passion for music and for excellence and for helping other people. So, thank you very much.
Okay, I had not planned on saying anything today, but something that Mark and Carol had said, just kind of turned a little light on. I came around, well, we moved to Plymouth in 1975, and I remember going to a community band concert in the park and seeing the Fife and Drum Corps, come on before the community band. And I think I was probably 4th grade, and I remember my mom turning to me and said, "Oh, those guys, they're really good." You know, I think you guys had just got back from Deep River, so there was talk of Deep River, and it was the bicentennial coming up, and so you know, the historical aspect was really interesting. But the Corps definitely, you know, made an impression because, well, I remember my mom turning to me and said, "Wow, maybe, you know, maybe someday you could be in that." And so it was probably, I think it was 2 years later, I was in 6th grade, I was at Central Middle School, and we had the opportunity as, you know, new drummers, we had just started, and we had the opportunity to take lessons after school from someone actually who had just left Central Middle School. He was in 9th grade at the time, but that was Jerry Hodgkin, who I know had been in the Corps. He was in the Corps probably from 76 to 80 or so. Anyway, so he asked a few of us who were taking lessons, oh, and it was 25 cents a head, by the way, per kid. So it cost me 25 cents, and he, you know, so after a few weeks of this, I think he, you know, he picked out a few of us and said, "Oh, would you, you know, 3 or 4 of you be interested in trying out for the Plymouth Fife and Drum Corps?" And you know, and I thought back to, you know, the time seeing him in the park, and I thought, well, you know, that might be fun. And so I showed up in January of '78, and there pretty much hasn't been a Monday night that I haven't been down at St. So Mark and Carol, thank you for starting this excellent group, and your standards that you guys you know, attained or wish to attain have continued. I can tell you now, and you know, and ever since then, that the Corps. See, I wasn't fortunate enough to be around while Mark and Carol were here. I came just a few years later, but the standards that they set were still there. It was very obvious at the time, and since that time, you know, I've tried very hard just to maintain that. I mean, the Corps really hasn't changed all that much in some respects. I mean, the people change, but the goals certainly haven't. And that you know, that desire for perfection is still there. So I can tell you, over the years, the Corps have continued to work just as hard. They're even today, I mean, the passion